We were trying to go after that white space, that opportunity where wine as in its current form, wasn't available. And I think, and then just our joy and ability to work with each other as friends, like, let's do something together. Let's have fun. Let's do something where we can start the day with a cup of coffee and how we're going to conquer the day and finish it with a can of wine and enjoy our lives working together. And I think that was the impetus for it. It's pretty simple. 7 years later, we're doing it. It's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of cans of wine, a lot of cups of coffee.
Let's discover the Cleveland entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are telling the stories of its entrepreneurs and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with the founders of Graham and Fisk's Wine in a Can, Graham, Veysey, and Fisk Biggar. Headquartered in the 1854 brick firehouse in Cleveland's Hingetown enclave, their wine in a can is now distributed in over 40 U.S. states, Asia, and the Caribbean, and has won numerous accolades, including being named number 16 on the Wine Enthusiast Magazine Top 100 Best Buy list. Graham and Fisk are childhood pals who met 25 years ago at Camp Roosevelt on the shores of Lake Erie. And in 2015, Graham came to Fisk with the simple idea to put wine in cans, and the rest, which we will explore in our conversation today, is history. Prior to founding and running Graham and Fisk's Wine in a Can, Fisk was a member of the founding team for BB's Kitchen in Aspen, Colorado, where he served as the general manager. In 2011, BB's was named as one of Colorado's top restaurants by Esquire. Meanwhile, Graham is also a neighborhood developer in Hingetown, where the company resides. He serves on the boards of the Cleveland Foundation and the Bidwell Foundation. He is the principal of Northwater Productions, an Emmy award-winning production firm creating content for global brands, arts and cultural institutions, and political campaigns. And additionally, Graham consults for the Aspen Institute and is a contributing producer for the Aspen Ideas Festival and New Orleans Book Festival. A contributor for Vanity Fair, and formerly was the project director for the Ohio City Farm, a 6-acre urban farm here in Cleveland. Graham and Fisk have an incredible story and dynamic as friends and as co-founders, and certainly seem to have the most fun doing it together. So please find yourself a Graham and Fisk's Wine in a Can, crack it open, and enjoy my conversation with Graham and Fisk. I think it's always particularly fun for me doing this podcast when I come across things in the real world that I find to be awesome and that I did not realize had their roots, history, backing here in Cleveland, only to learn pretty recently what you've built. Graham and Fisk's Wine in a Can is precisely one of those findings for me, something I came across in the wild and was like, wow, that is a very cool idea and it's well executed. And then to be made aware that its origin story is just a few blocks from where I live in Ohio City in Cleveland is very exciting. So been looking forward to hearing the story of how, it actually all came together and your guys' story as well. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Jeffrey, thanks so much for having us. And the story really dates back over 30 years ago when Fisk and I first met at summer camp on the shores of Lake Erie. We usually tell people the Great Lakes because they're not necessarily geographically into Lake Erie, but we went to Camp Roosevelt in Perry and have been the best of pals since. So it dates back not only to this part of Cleveland because we're headquartered in the Ohio City Firehouse in the Hingetown enclave of this great neighborhood, but it really goes back to when we were in grade school and we caused trouble together when we were going to this outdoor camp, whether it was on a sailboat or hiking or horseback riding. And then we had different phases in our life that we always reconnected, going to high school together, doing the college internship together, doing the post-college mountain towns together. And then in the spring of 2014, I was renovating the old firehouse here and was covered in construction dust, went to the neighborhood bar for a drink. I was craving wine, wondered, why isn't there wine in a can? They had all these craft beers in cans. And I called Fisk up because he was finishing up business school. I'm like, Fisk, what do you think about putting wine in a can and starting a canned wine company? And he was like, sign me up.
Yeah, so got to work in the fall of 2015. We had found a winemaker in California and started selling out of the back of a 1969 Colbert Ultra van, store to store, bar to bar, hoping to make our way back to Cleveland. We were entrepreneurs in the supply chain of the bev alc industry, and distribution's a hard thing to come by, but we were fortunate to have support back here. I think within about 6 months, we had a Ohio partner, and we were able to get back into the Firehouse here.
And now 7 years later, we really look at that year and a half of building and planning the company as crucial as some of the supply chain has squeezed those partnerships that we cultivated from April of 2014 to when we put our first can out on the line in late summer of 2015 are still partners of ours. We were first movers in the space with regards to putting awesome wine in a can and also developing proprietary blends. So we've got 4 different types. We've got a white wine with bubbles, a rosé with bubbles, a red still, and a white still. And they're all deliberately non-vintage and non-varietal on the can, but we worked hard to have universal drinkability so that they could stand alone, but then also be your everyday go-to, whether it's when you're barbecuing to when you just want to literally not have to worry about washing any stemware. And where my background's in marketing and communications, Fisk came from the food and beverage world and worked at the Little Nell in Aspen, Colorado, which I think arguably could be one of the largest feeding grounds for sommeliers. And so when we first had this idea, Fisk reached out to his food and beverage network too and said, "Hey guys, what do you think?"
And I mean, a lot of things I want to ask about there, but one of them is, what is the perception from your sommelier friends?
We asked a lot of what do you think in 2014 and 2015. A lot of the responses are, "You guys are crazy." But you fast forward now, it was in our theory at the time was that there was a dissociation happening between quality and packaging, and that the wine industry was slow to adapt. And there's countless examples of that. We've all seen it, whether it's just the synthetic corks, the screw tops, the box wine category. So, and that's where we looked at can as this open opportunity for us. And so the response that we got was, is there going to be a marketplace for this? But what we held on to was, we need to make awesome wine, and that will win them over. So when we got the product and I shipped it to them and I said, "Hey, look, this is what we created. Try it." That's when they came back and said, "Oh yeah, it's great. It's really cool." And so I think that's always been the liquid to lips, as Graham and I both sit here drinking a can of wine, has always been is open it up and try it. And then you're going to have that aha moment, because what you're also going to find is what the craft brewers found is that can's a better vessel for wine. Not all wine, most wine, 90% of wine is not meant to be aged and put in a cellar in a bottle. 90% of wine is meant to be drank within 6 months. And so if you have a can which doesn't allow ultraviolet rays to go through, and it doesn't allow oxygen to hit it, it's a better seal, well, you've actually got a more stable product. And so I think over the last 7 years, as we've been telling that story and the message has been getting out and the industry's expanded, we've really seen the adaptation and around it, and that canned wine can't be good mentality fade away.
And it's not just our friends that are telling us that. We've won 8 Best Buy awards from Wine Enthusiast Magazine, which is their most coveted accolade, because it's high caliber wine at a price that is achievable on a day-to-day basis. And then we were so psyched. You took home number 16 on the top 100 list. And we were the only canned wine on that list for the 2021 top 100 Best Buy awards. And so it's something that we put on every can. So you've got the fact that Wine Enthusiast Magazine's given us the nod, but then the sommeliers that validate it. But then also, Fisk was mentioning the destabilizing factors for wine with light and oxygen. There's also just the portability of the ease of drinking out of a can if you're at Cedar Point or if you're at First Energy Stadium. And so we've commonly gotten, as we work to get into places, people say, "Oh, well, we don't have a huge wine program. And we almost like hearing that as long as the folks are willing to try it, because once we get offered to their consumers, people try it, then they have another one. I was getting my hair cut yesterday at the barber shop, and one of the chairs down the way said, my mom had 5 of the Graham and Fisk wine in a can at the Rod Stewart concert at Blossom, and had a blast and had so much fun that she called me, both on her way home and then the next day, saying those guys they're onto something. So it's that validation, and Blossom's a great example, and because this is the land and people know that venue, they did not move a lot of wine, because if they were serving it with single serve, it was typically a low caliber juice. And when you're drinking out of either a crappy plastic cup or you're drinking out of a container that isn't a proven package like an aluminum can, each of our cans are 8.4 ounces, and we really are proud about the juice that we put in it. And I've always joked that we're kind of like the hair care for men. Not only are we the founders, but we love drinking our product. And so we are folks that really want to make sure that the quality control is high, because we fill our fridge with it. We share it with our friends. It's our names on every can. It's our dogs. It's the Firehouse and the retro RV that Fisk had alluded to. So it's very personal to us, and it's a brand that we are really proud of having built the last 7 years.
So just going back to inception there for a sec. So you're at the local bar. Wait, which bar were you at, by the way? Just curious.
We're at ABC Tavern down on 25th.
Amazing. Sure. Yeah. And you're asking, why isn't there wine in a can? At this point, when you guys are ideating, had historically you worked together in an entrepreneurial capacity, just kind of bouncing ideas off each other? Had you worked together before in as co-founders?
No, so this was the first thing that we've co-founded together, but we've always, from grade school, bounced ideas off of each other, and it ranges from business ideas to what do you think of this person I want to take out on a date, to what do you think about going out and doing a summer in Washington, D.C. So
I think the very first one was, you want to try to sail to Canada? I don't think the camp counselors are watching.
Yeah, completely.
That's awesome. So I guess having bounced ideas off each other before, why take this one seriously? How do you start to validate that? Why isn't there wine in a can? What are the barriers to entry? Why haven't people done this historically? Why is now the right time to give it a shot?
I think we both saw the opportunity. I think for us it clicked, and we saw the use case. It was so simple. How great would this be to have at a baseball game? And there was, and the fact that it was simple and obvious to us made us think that it would be simple and obvious to others. And that was the white space we saw. You talk a lot about disruption, and we weren't trying to disrupt anything. We were trying to go after that white space, that opportunity where wine, as in its current form, wasn't available. And I think, and then just our joy and ability to work with each other as friends, like, let's do something together. Let's have fun. Let's do something where we can start the day with a cup of coffee and how we're going to conquer the day, and finish it with a can of wine, and enjoy our lives working together. And I think that was the impetus for it. It's pretty simple. 7 years later, we're doing it. It's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of cans of wine, a lot of cups of coffee.
As you're working through the inception of this, what in retrospect did you guys find is like your first big break? That like, okay, this is not just a cool idea that we have, but we're on to something bigger here.
We got into the theater at the Ace Hotel in downtown LA before we had the first liquid in a can. So that, I think, was a great motivator, because we thought, okay, if we can do this many cases per month, and all of a sudden, the beauty of taking this nationally, it motivated us to realize that there's a there. I also think there was a flip side to that, where it was one of the easier sales that we've had. And we didn't realize how hard it would be to scale after a really strong first couple of meetings. And so I think that was a nice boost from a morale standpoint. It just wasn't necessarily something that we would have. We've not necessarily had that easy of a sale in the last 7 years. So it was a good thing, but it was also a little bit of a false peak, if you want.
I really want to do a deep dive here on the kind of branding, because I think most of us are familiar with, walking into a wine store, being completely overwhelmed by, the variety, the varietals, the geography, not necessarily knowing, what it is that you're buying. And there's all this very particular branding, and it is in some ways tied to the tradition of, wine has been done a certain way for the last, hundreds, thousands of years, and there's a tried and true practice. How do you guys approach a novel packaging vehicle of something that has been in our culture and society in a particular way for so long?
I think it goes back to our first year selling. What we realized is we were selling our story. Well, buyers were both to buyers in the retail market, the people who control what goes on the shelves or in the stadiums. When, to your point, we'd show up with this kind of atypical wine guys in t-shirts and jeans, talking about canned wine and talking about how we started it with an idea at the bar and an RV in Berkeley. And now we're, coming to blossom. And I think it was this personal interaction that we were having. And we realized that the brand needed to have that to be personal, and so that's where Graham and Fisk came from. Is that when we realized it's back again, and I can repeat myself on simple. This is Graham and Fisk wine in a can. That's what we're selling.
I think you're also getting the consumer who doesn't traditionally think of wine being in a can, seeing it front and center, and so we have often said it's a little bit of Ben and Jerry's meets boxed water, from a storytelling standpoint. And, we've got our dogs in every can. We've got the Firehouse that we're headquartered in, and we've got the 1969 Corvair Ultra Van, the retro RV. And, we really think that passion for the brand, and then that foundational, multi-decade friendship really resonates both with the consumer, and then from a B2B standpoint, the buyers that are the gatekeepers to get on the shelves in the grocery stores or in the concessionaires at the stadiums and arenas, or on the menu at places that are serving our product on premise.
How do you think about competition? Is it traditional wine in a bottle is the competition? Is it, it's the seltzer proliferation of the last few years? How you guys thought about the market broadly, and how you are differentiating there?
I think our biggest nemesis is the old school mindset of a buyer. So our competition isn't necessarily, this other brand or this other category within the space. For us, it's really, as soon as we're able to get in front of the consumer, we know that there's pull through. And yet the challenge is more getting that shelf placement as entrepreneurs, as opposed to a giant conglomerate wine house or liquor entity. And so we're not the corporate guys that have 100 plus brands in their portfolio and 1,000 different salespeople. So for us, it's really getting over that psychological hump that two guys that grew up in Cleveland that have awesome California wine that are put in a can, you have a product that people will buy. It's a real blue ocean in this space. And I still think when you look at the pie chart or the bar graph of the growth of this category, it just still goes up and up.
And have you seen, as blue ocean as it is, others pick up on and run with the idea that you guys are running with as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you've seen others pick up, and I think to your point, you've seen this proliferation of RTDs, whether it's cocktails or seltzers or canned spritzers. And I think the one thing is we've seen a lot of this come in the industry around the industry change is we still see our opportunity in the wine space. We know the story that we're telling and who we're going after hasn't changed. We're going after wine drinkers. And so to Graham's point about a blue ocean, it really has been putting the earphones on, drown out the noise. Because you got a lot of people like, are you going to make a seltzer? Are you going to make a spritzer? What do you think about the cocktail space? Do we do Graham and Fisk, vodka soda? And we really, with wine in a can, we know our lane, we're staying in it, and we know that the opportunity is still there, and we've got to go after that and not get distracted.
And for folks that want to decipher the alphabet soup, RTD is ready to drink.
Yeah.
So the acronym RTD that Fisk threw around, I don't expect everybody to know that it's ready to drink, and we'll try to catch ourselves with some of those acronyms that are very much inside baseball.
Yeah. When we started in this space, Graham and I were on a phone call and someone threw like a very common industry acronym at us. And we were on a Google chat with each other. I'll never forget this. And we're like, OND question mark? Like,
yeah, OND. I was trying to remember what it was.
It was OND.
And we're like, what is OND? And everybody's talking about OND.
Everybody's talking about this OND.
And it's October, November, December. And so it's a time of year that in the alcohol space, it overwhelms every other conversation that's happening. It's like, it's OND, because a huge number.
Yeah, 60% of all alcohol is consumed in those 3 months of the year. It's crazy.
We don't know if that's exactly 60%.
Yeah, are we fact checking this?
Well, I'm just making sure that you said that with great authority, and I'm like, it's a lot of the yearly consumption happens in OND. So.
Don't fact check it, but it's a lot.
Don't fact check that. We're just having a conversation here. On that thread, though, I imagine a huge learning curve with this over time, and what have you found to be people's misconceptions about wine, about what it is you're doing, things that have kind of surprised you about the industry of wine?
Wow.
I think how cutthroat people are. Like, we're just two guys that want to have a good time, and we would get stabbed in the chest if some of these brands would have their way with us. But we are optimists. We have seen the consumers react to our brand. We didn't realize how much of a David and Goliath game it was, and I think that's probably some naivete that was good to have, or else we wouldn't have gotten into this industry. And yet at the end of the day, it goes back to Fisk's point of two pals that are working towards this shared goal, and we've got a great team that helps us get there. And our truth is real, and we know that once we have our product on a menu or on a shelf, it will move. And so that's really just always our challenge, is getting that product placed and our brand on the shelf, and then we're high-fiving each other.
It sounds like maybe this wasn't necessarily the case, but I would imagine, the proof in the pudding as you guys are growing and moving more wine in a can over time, the pitch, the sell becomes easier in some capacities. But
yes and no. I think as you grow this, yes, the space has gotten easier. It's more accepted. We aren't walking in saying, hey, we're guys with canned wine, and immediately getting shut down like we used to. But at the same time, too, we're working with, there's certain levels of dynamics. There's, Ohio City Brew Stop, great store. You can talk to the owner right there, versus the Giant Eagles and we're sold in Dave & Buster's. Like, those are big decision makers that are hard to get to, that take years of relationships or being part of this industry for a long time, that Graham and I certainly didn't have 7 years ago, and that we've had to earn along the way.
And then we're still earning. I think that the other part is we would get so bummed about placement and then it not getting renewed, not because people weren't buying it, but because there was another sparkly object from a neighborhood bar or a neighborhood liquor store. And yet we then came to realize the transaction effort for a place like that is almost as much as the transaction effort for a Dave & Buster's or a Quaker Steak and Lube or a Applebee's franchise that owns 60 plus units. So we started to focus our attention to those whales and not get bogged down by, oh, it'd be great to have it in these different stores, but the effort to do that is almost as much as the effort to get a multi-unit deal done. So it's stuff that we've definitely learned through the years and emotionally been able to be okay with those placements sunsetting. And then it's surprising somebody will reach out and say, oh, yeah, we'd love to have you guys on our shelves again. We said, great, but we're not going to lose sleep over it.
The emotional check's hard. That one's because you walk into a place that you know and you love and you're like, God, why aren't we sold here right now? And you're like, I should take the time and energy. And you're like, no, I shouldn't. I've got to focus on what Graham said it's okay. I'll still come and enjoy this place, but this isn't going to be the thing for us. Like, we've got to kind of create that groundswell.
Yeah. I mean, focus seems clear to be the theme here, right? It's a small product offering, targeted market.
Focus and tenacity.
Yes. Hustle.
You got to follow up is key. I mean, follow up. I mean, I think the one things that we've built a reputation for in a positive way across the industry is we've made a name for ourselves with, what I would say in this landscape of, your traditional buying set is like, those are the guys who will work harder than anyone else. They're going to follow up on everything that they say they'll do, and they're relentlessly passionate about it. So I think as long as we do those things, we should be successful.
On the grape side of this equation, before it becomes in a can, was there a process to like find the right, blend, balance? How did you figure, this is the flavor profile we want, working with the growers and that whole process?
Beauty is we liked to drink before we founded this company. So we had a great baseline and we had developed palates. Intolerance. So we did do an exhaustive search of different winemakers in wine country out in California. We felt like it was important to have a California wine. We interviewed a bunch of folks, and this guy named John, who's been in the industry for decades, he syncopated with our philosophy and ethos and got what we were trying to do. We understood the fact that the blend also needed to be unique because you're drinking out of a can. And your listeners can't see me, Jeffrey, but when you put your nose, when you're drinking it out of a can, it's not going into the stemware like you'd be drinking if it was bottled juice.
Right. You can't do the swirl and the...
Yeah, you're not doing the swirl. So you've got to have blends that work without your nose being shoved into a stemware. So we tried a ton of different types, and they were all blends. Again,
it's a fun process.
Yeah, it was a fun process. And we charged John with making blends that he could replicate by and large year after year, regardless of the harvest. So, if say, the Chardonnay had a bad harvest, like just like your craft beer, you don't know if there was a bad hops harvest or there was a barley infestation, whatever it was, you just go to the next farm. And so from our perspective, the vineyard isn't as important as the blend at the end. And so to make sure that John's able to pull from various vineyards, pull from various varietals, and get that universal drinkability that's consistent can after can, year after year. And he was able to do it. And to his credit, 7 years into it, you could really put a blindfold on and try various can runs that we've done. And there's that consistency that we think people really appreciate.
And so even with the intense focus, I imagine at one point it didn't start with, bubbles necessarily as an offering. Of the things you can work on and choose to focus on when you think about product expansion, not to ask the question that you say that everyone asks you and you're like, we have to focus. But, obviously you're weighing different opportunities. At what point does it make sense for you guys to take one seriously? And how did you, I guess, first make that decision to do an expansion?
I think with Graham and I, when we both look at each other and nod our heads at the same time, I think it's that simple. I think it's like there's been ideas he's had that I don't love, or certainly ones that I've had that he doesn't love. And like, as soon as we're kind of like in that dance, it's just not going to do the thing. And we have to both be excited about it. I think, well, Bubbles was a good example of that on the white. Rosé, I think, was the next example, and then Rosé with Bubbles. And then the smaller 250 milliliter can. So I think when we kind of say, hey, listen, we're staying in this lane, that doesn't mean we're not innovative or aren't willing to be innovative. We were innovative. That's how we got here. And, we have to think and act in a forward-looking manner. We have to go to where the puck's going to be. So, I think for us, it's really in our dialogue, where do we think the puck's going to be, and how do we get there together, and what is going to make us excited about it? And so I think when it's there, you just know it. It's there. It's just what we're going to do. It's a short conversation. When it's not there, it's a long conversation. Yeah, I think that is, the R&D process for us, I think, in certain ways is, are we both really excited about this idea? And if we are, we'll go do it. And some of them work and some of them don't. We've got, probably some things that are Googleable that, but that's the whole point. That's it. But either way, it's fun.
And it's got to be that mutual head nod, and it's got to stick. So it's not one night of ideation and the next day we're definitely going to do it. It's making sure we talk through it, and it's not something that fades in a few days, but we're excited about it. Because when we do a new SKU, it is a year's commitment. Not like 1 year, but like multiple years commitment on it, based on what we need to do from a supply chain standpoint, the effort to put into it. So it's nothing that we ever take lightly.
When you don't have that mutual head nod, how is it that you guys deal with disagreements between each other? Sometimes, in the many co-founder situations I've seen, the friends becoming co-founders, it can be complicated at times. How you guys kind of work through that?
We just talk through it. We get in this room most of the time. It's a conference room. It's the old showers that the firemen used to use, like the shared shower. So now it's a conference room with a cart table from the Richmond Brothers factory. But we sit in here and we put the positives and the deltas on the whiteboard that's right there. And, we talk through it. And there haven't been occasions that I can think of where those conversations haven't gotten us to a consensus. So,
yeah, maybe I'll take the detour to the Firehouse, because I
think it probably helps that cans of wine are involved. It kind of, any edge gets smoothed over the longer we have those discussions. But no,
I also think too, in those conversations, when you're having those, and I think it's just a conversation with any partner, is at the end of this conversation, or at the end of this, we got to walk out of this room as partners. And so even if the whiteboard says, hey, we are at different spots on this, like, all right, well, you want to go get a can of wine? The answer is yes. And I think that's, of course there've been, moments where we have those conversations. They're few and far between, and they're, I think it's a function of a healthy relationship, just to be able to know how you're going to work through it. Just come in here, let's have a can of wine and get it done.
When you think about, you mentioned where the puck is going analogy, how far out are you guys thinking? Like, do you have a vision for, world domination by wine in a can, 10 years from now, and working backwards from there? How are you approaching I guess in retrospect, the impact, the what you want to do with this company?
I always tell folks that reach out and ask about entrepreneurial endeavors is that you're driving really fast and there's always a cliff on the horizon. And some days you're driving closer to the cliff and some days the cliff's farther out from view, but it's always there. And so I think that from a nuts and bolts standpoint, it's always what's your sales velocity and what's your runway in terms of working capital to make sure that the ship's staying afloat. So, for us, it's very cyclical. Fisk mentioned O&D, and we talked about it. We have to have a certain amount of inventory to keep up, with sales demand. So those are all factors that are constant. We get a phone call, and sometimes we need to ratchet up production tenfold to fulfill a particular request. And so I think that was always, though, our strategy from day zero was how do we make sure that our model is as scalable as possible, and making sure that we never felt like we needed to, it's only in year 4 that we'll go above 10,000 cases. It's like, no, we are in a growth mindset all the time. I think that we've evolved in terms of how we see that growth. Is it only in cans of wine? Is it only in certain types of lenses with regards to EBITDA? Is it only in terms of reorders? That fluctuates, but at the end of the day, there's a sign that hangs behind Fisk's desk, and it says "Move more cans." And that was a conversation very early on that we had about what's our mission, and that "move more cans." It's true from a forecasting standpoint, 5 years out to today, when we go through a list of hot sales prospects or people that we need to reorder, we're emailing them, we're picking up the phone and calling them, and we're rabid about moving more cans.
What has you guys most excited looking forward over the next, year, call it?
Wow. I think over the next year, it's, over the last year, we've expanded our distribution now to 43 states across the U.S. And we've coming out of this pandemic period, which I know we're certainly still in a pandemic, but I'd say that in a behavioral mindset, our business shifted 180 degrees twice in the last 12 months. And I think what it did for us was we learned about different verticals of our business. And we're coming out of it now saying we've got three verticals to this business. We have our direct to consumer, which was there for the deep pandemic period and was there for a full year. And now we've got retail coming back, both on and off premise, and those count as 2 verticals. So what we've done over the last year is we've seen those stabilize and seeing the retail start to grow and also retaining and growing direct to consumer. So I think over the next 12 to 18 months is really being hopeful in the fact that we in this macro environment have this kind of stable environment that we can continue to strategize against. So I think it's a little bit short term, but it gives us, for the first time, we can sit back in a room. We all lit our hair on fire 2 years ago and have been figuring it out. I think for the first time, we're really back in a room saying, okay, here is the new environment. Here's what the long term looks like, because everything changed on a dime a few years ago, and so it's nice to plan again.
Is there a certain staying power, you think, to the direct to consumer part of this that did blow up over the pandemic and maybe is normalized now, but is that there to stay?
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think there's a real contraction with the 5-minute delivery convenience play. I think people are more willing to say, all right, if I'm craving Swedish fish or a 6-pack, like I'm going to walk a couple blocks to grab it and get home. Like I don't need to be glued to the couch. We see that with certain entities that are in steep decline with regards to that convenience factor. But I think from a DTC standpoint, anybody who's had the patience and they'll continue to have that patience for a 2 or 3 day delivery via FedEx. And we love FedEx. We were a 2020 FedEx Small Business Grant winner. They've been great to us, and we have continued to grow with them, and definitely love those sorts of partners, and they've been good to us. So that ability to have our product shipped right to your door, you being able to track it from the moment it leaves our warehouse to when it's at a sorting facility, to when it's on the truck, to when it's on your front porch. Like, that's something that I think consumers will not only maintain, but grow from an appetite standpoint.
Is there anything that keeps you guys up at night? What are the parts that are most challenging, right now? Maybe what has you guys concerned, if anything?
His son keeps him up at night, and my toddler daughter keeps me up at night. So, no, I think we sleep really well knowing that we've got a great truth and a baseline that when we get up in the morning and we have our really delicious cup of Rising Star coffee, we then can start to sell our brand to people and share that affinity we have that's very genuine and authentic.
Is just on the Rising Star front, has the I know you've had a part in this as well, but is like the development of Hingetown and kind of the progress that's been made there, is there any relationship to the business of Graham and Fisk Wine in a Can, or have you just kind of thought about those separately? Like, is there? I realize the company is mostly I don't know. Have you thought about opening a wine in a can store in Hingetown? That's really the question.
We had that conversation.
That would be one of those aforementioned whiteboard conversations.
Yeah. We have thought about doing a can cafe or a bar that's focused, all on ready to drinks. For us, it goes back to that staying in the lane and the distraction to do that with the importance of growing these national accounts that are really the crux of our business. It would be a lot of fun, but it would be a distraction to our core business. But I think that what we have done that is directly involved with the neighborhood work is pop-ups in the summertime and teaming up, be it the Stonewall athletic folks that were in town just a few weeks ago. There was a ton of rosé with bubbles flowing at that event outside a jukebox and between the transformer station. So we love that kind of collaboration with our neighbors. We're in the volleyball league that takes place next door. We'll make sure that we team up with the LGBT Center in Phyllis, who's amazing, to do a fundraiser during June with our Pride boxes. So there's a long list that is very civic oriented, be it Fisk being part of the Bridge Builders class of Leadership Cleveland to the various boards that we're on. We care deeply about this place, and I think that's what the seed of Hingetown was. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's all about being rabid, about taking an idea and turning it into action.
What does the company actually look like in Cleveland? How many folks are there, and how's that looking?
So, and you think about the old Firehouse. You think about the fact that there's a bunk room that is where the firemen used to sleep, and so we've got a half a dozen teammates that fill that bunk room where firemen slept for years and years, and it still has two of the poles in there. And we've got a ton of canned wine. We've got 2 coolers filled with our awesome wine in a can. We've got a frosé machine that gets kicked up every Friday.
It's going on tomorrow.
So it's a mighty team that has touch points all over the place. So we'll talk to a water park in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they're like BFFs with Gracie, who's one of our associates. We'll have a compliment from an entity in Southern California about the point of sale material that Tyler who's another colleague, put together. So, it's great to be based in Cleveland, but we're really working in the world, not only with those 40 plus states that Fisk mentioned, but it's exporting to Japan and the Caribbean and making sure that, we can be a Cleveland-based company working on a global scale.
Has it gained traction in any place that has been particularly surprising to you?
Ooh, yeah, we've had a lot of surprises along the way. I mean, I think some of the surprises, I think one of which I think is a good example, when we're tracking sales, there was this restaurant in Colorado that came up called Bad Axe. It's one of those axe throwing chains. And first we saw it kind of reordering going, and then all of a sudden they're doing 200-300 cases a year. And we're like, man, we are killing it in this axe throwing chain. So that really kind of opened that surprised us. We didn't think much about it, but it really opened our eyes to this entertainment. And now if you kind of fast forward, we're in Dave & Buster's, right? So, I mean, that axe throwing thing surprised me, but now I'm so unsurprised about Dave & Buster's because it opened my eyes to the opportunity there. Graham just mentioned Japan. I think Japan's a pretty cool one. I don't know for you. What's your favorite account out there?
I don't know if there's a favorite account, but there's a favorite text that I get, pretty often now of friends from different parts of life that I might not have talked to in a bit, taking a picture with a can of Graham and Fisk wine in a can at a venue that I didn't even know that we were in, or at a store that I didn't even know that we had shelf space in. And they're like, oh my gosh, look. And they're elated, and it's just as a great validation. So there's not necessarily one account, but there's that text picture that is of pals from different phases of life that always brings a smile to my face.
That's the best thing to get.
Yeah. And then I automatically screenshot it and send it to Fisk, and he does the same. So,
where is that? Louisiana. Yeah. We're in Louisiana.
I'm like, oh my, where?
That's awesome. Well, we'll close it out here. I'll leave it. I'll leave some just kind of greenfield for any closing thoughts, reflections on the journey so far, and then we'll tie it back to some stuff in Cleveland.
I'm wearing Dockers right now, but I think Nike's whole mantra of just do it is super important for people who are listening and thinking about an entrepreneurial endeavor. And it might be oversimplification, but the fact is, if you don't do it, you're going to regret it if it's an idea that's resonated with you.
I guess, mine's a little bit more in the moment and probably got from Instagram reel or something like that. But I thought it was a good one. An Olympic sprinter talking about when you're chasing your dreams, a third of it's pleasant, a third of it's neutral, and a third of it's hard. It's just the way it is. And I think to Graham's point, it's a hell of a ride. It is so much fun, and I wouldn't trade it in for anything in the world.
All right. Well, our closing question is related to Cleveland, and it is not for your favorite things in Cleveland, but for hidden gems, for things that other folks may not necessarily know about, but perhaps should.
Yeah. If somebody hasn't, I had lunch that I feel badly for Fisk because you can probably smell it on my breath, but I had an amazing sandwich from Larder, which is on the ground floor of the Ohio City Firehouse at West 29th and Church. And so if you haven't been to Larder and you're listening to this and it's Tuesday through Saturday, get on your bike or walk over, get in the car and head to 1455 West 29th Street.
It would be too dangerous for me to work with you guys because I would be at Larder every day, I think.
It's like we got Rising Star on one side, we got Larder on the other. I barely leave this place. Then you got great, beach area. You got great things in the neighborhood, don't get me wrong, but good stuff right here. I was thinking of kind of like a favorite, just the sunset of Whiskey Island. There is nothing better than laying down the blanket, bringing a picnic, and
cracking open a can of wine.
I think that's one of the best date nights I've had in a long time. Just, finding a spot there.
What about you, Jeffrey? What's a spot that we might not, that you've discovered of late?
Of late, my recent favorite has been the Red Line Greenway development. Everything the Metro Parks is amazing, but it has brought me a lot of joy having that in the vicinity just to go on a run or a bike Because then it connects all the way to the towpath, and you can just take that from Ohio City all the way to Akron. It's incredible.
It is incredible. There's a tree that's growing within an old vertical trellis that
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's really neat, and just one of those magical nodes within the Metro Park system. So I think I would second your Metro Parks Red Line Greenway suggestion.
Awesome. Well, Graham, Fisk, this was awesome. Really appreciate your guys' time and coming on to share your story.
Well, thanks for having us, Jeffrey.
Appreciate it.
If folks had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Email us at info@grahamandfisk.com.
We get them.
Easy. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks a lot.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternjefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.